My name is Francis. My cultural background is Filipino-Canadian, so I was born and raised here in Toronto, Canada. And what I do is come from a background in healthcare, and I also work in healthcare IT.
What's your favorite traditional dish and why?
One of my favorite traditional Filipino dishes is called nilaga, and I think it's really more of a personal preference, which is there's a mix of beef and ginger in a soup. It's a soup-based type of dish. I've loved it since I was a kid, and I continue to love it to this day. Sometimes nothing beats mom's home cooking whenever you get home from the day and you just enjoy it. So I try to replicate that recipe when I cook for myself, and I've introduced that to my kids too. It's a broth dish, and it's beef. They also often have like beef shank as the cut for it, and then they put potatoes, beans, like green beans, cabbage, carrots to add a little sweetening to it. Of course, being Filipino too, we have that with a side of rice.
Can you share a memorable cultural tradition you love?
I think one thing that really sticks out from my childhood is the whole idea of the block rosary. So Filipinos, are known to be, very like devout Roman Catholics, and they practice that, quite well. And my parents were Roman Catholics, as were a lot of people that basically were my peers, my parents' peers, back when I was a kid. The block rosary is actually, it's like a reference to like the neighborhood block. As I understand it, I know that there's other interpretations of block too. And so the rosary, we would pray the rosary like every month, and basically the rosary would be transferred to another house every month. So it'd go around, quote unquote, the block. And, we would have our prayers. It would be a great opportunity for community to get together, to have some nilaga, to have some Filipino like food. And you know what? It was even not just bound by like the neighborhood itself. It was actually, outside of Scarborough, where we're from, into like North York or other parts of the cities. It again kind of reinforced that whole sense of community, although it wasn't always just within the neighborhood.
What's one misconception about your heritage that you'd like to debunk?
Yeah, I'd like to say, well, two things. One thing is, like as with a lot of, I guess, immigrants who come, overseas, and then they end up remitting money. Filipinos are known to kind of remit a lot of money back to the Philippines because they, for whatever reason, they see a need to, help their family back home. That's a great thing, right? But at the same time, I know that I'd like to reframe that question and just like use it as a way to kind of talk about, what Filipinos, at least in my generation now, are doing for the communities here in Canada right now. So there are a number of influential and thought leaders in a number of professions. So, for example, I'm not sure if you follow politics, but like the Minister of Small Businesses, as well as she's also the MP for Mississauga-Streetsville. So she's a Filipina. She's making waves, and she's giving fair representation in our Canadian government. So that's one person who is like, doing great things. For the local economy and for the local people. There are a number of other people like kind of within like my generation too. A couple of names that just kind of come to mind are like Romeo Candido. He's worked with a number of big musical productions here. He's worked for the CBC. He's a director, film writer, you name it. A couple of other people that I also know. Michael Masankai. I think he's also really big in the film and production industry here, even in the music industry. And a couple of my peers, there's this group named Kuya, who comprise two brothers, the Durango brothers. They've written a number of songs for internationally renowned artists, whether it's Nelly, whether it's a number of artists that I don't come to mind right now, but they're basically behind some of some really big music award wins for artists, and so they're pretty prolific writers. So I just wanted to kind of reframe that question there, and again use it to really help people understand that aside from just remitting money abroad and helping people, family and friends abroad, is that they actually are contributing quite well to the local economy and the arts and culture.
Can you share a fond memory from your upbringing that highlights your heritage?
Fond memory. I think I kind of referred to that whole block rosary thing. That definitely is one thing that, again, being again like the son of really devout Catholics, like was the practice of our religion and our faith was really ingrained in how we lived our lives. I think it even almost groomed me personally what my earlier school years were like. So because Filipinos are known to love music and singing, so guess what, I ended up going to a choir school. There's also some, I guess, thoughts around how Filipinos are typically work in healthcare or they're nurses. So guess what? I became a nurse, and then I also became, I did also have a musical background. So it's interesting how, there are some, I guess, stereotypes of Filipinos, but in this case, I'm actually kind of like a representation of it. Funny enough.
If you could time travel to any period in Asian history, or even Filipino history,
yeah,
which one?
Philippine history. So there are two periods where I would be curious. I'll pick one that's pretty, I think, monumental when it comes to even like Philippine history in general. So I would take it back to the Philippine Revolution. So the Philippine Revolution was heavily influenced by basically a very, very well-known Filipino named Jose Rizal, and he was like a polymath. He was like smart at everything. He was like multilingual. He, by profession, was an ophthalmologist, so an eye doctor, and he had written. He was actually a very prolific writer. So he had written a number of a really large amount of literature that helped influence the revolutionists and the Philippine Revolution back in the late 1800s. So this is following roughly 300 years of Spanish colonization. Yeah, so it was, I think after, the Philippines, there were a number of people back then that wanted to be independent. So again, his thought leadership, I would say, is what led to that revolution. Although Jose Rizal was seen to not really be an endorser of like a rebellion per se, but more of through political reform. It's questionable that whether or not he truly was for like an actual rebellion or a revolt versus reform. Either way, he seemed to be very, very influential in basically the Philippines adopting their independence from Spain. So it would be a really, really great period to really understand and see how everything kind of intersected back then.
Is there a notable figure from your cultural background?
As I just spoke of Jose Rizal, like I think he's quite inspirational in a number of ways. He fought for what he believed in. He was influential. Had it not been for Jose and all his constituents, then the Philippines may not be where they are today. So it's probably a very important person in the altering of Philippine history. So that's why I would be looking up to him.
Can you describe a place here, Canada, or where you've grown up, where you feel a strong connection to your roots?
Being born and raised in Scarborough, it's really, a hotbed for a lot of Filipinos, Filipino immigrants. It's what I've known. So I do feel, quite comfortable being home. I think, mostly everyone who considers a certain place their home would feel comfortable there. So that's definitely one place. Yeah, I would really just put it to that. The whole caravan movement. So there was Caravan, which was like an arts and culture kind of event, and it was held annually by the city. And so what was pretty cool as a kid. What I found was, they would issue like passports, and then you would go to each pavilion. So there would be like a Philippine pavilion, there would be a China pavilion, there would be there would be a Dutch pavilion. So what I found really like cool was that we could go throughout the city, and like it's not just in Scarborough, but throughout the GTA, and you'd be able to like go there. You'd be able to really absorb and understand people's cultures and their background, and what even the food, even the entertainment, and whatnot. So that was a really cool thing to be able to really experience, not only in Scarborough but also throughout the city of Toronto.
What's a saying, quote, you grew up with?
So one saying that my parents, mostly my mom, would say all the time is "Sus Mariosep," and that kind of speaks to like our Roman Catholic upbringing, which translates basically to "Sus," God, Mary, Osep, Joseph. So people would use that, or at least my mom would use that, when she's kind of like, she maybe dropped something by accident, or like she's just astonished by something. So that's one thing that I kind of grew up with, and that really sticks to my mind right now.
Is there a tradition that you would want to pass on to your family?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think we were just talking about that earlier, right? So, being, the son of immigrants here, I think we've been pretty privileged to be able to experience kind of like firsthand, from our parents, what some of the traditions and cultural practices have been. But then on this, in the same token, we've had the luxury of living and working and being in Toronto in Canada. So I think that question is something that I always I keep on asking myself, especially as I'm trying to impart good life lessons to my kids, right? So I mean, one thing that I would say is I've spoken quite a bit about my background in practicing Roman Catholicism. So appreciating that that particular religion, that practice of faith offers a good moral, ethical kind of framework for people to just to be their best selves. I mean I would definitely continue to encourage my kids to practice in such a way, so that they can be good people in society, and contribute, and just do the best that they can.